In tiny communities clinging precariously to Cornwall's storm-carved cliffs, mothers taught their daughters the lore of plants and flowers, just as they taught them to churn butter from fresh milk. The air was thick with the aroma of calming infusions in their warm, firelit kitchens, festooned with bundles of herbs to keep plague at bay. Amulets, stocked with more potent mixtures, were hidden among ointments to heal wounds, and drinks to control fevers that crowded their shelves. On market day, when the trip to town carried them past one cottage and stood out from the rest, the good wives of Fredham wore these around their necks. The lonely, dilapidated house blended well with the hedgerow. Its thatch was woven with thorny branches, and an ancient root twisted over its threshold. The women rushed past it, faces averted, despite the fact that there was no real sign of life inside. But when the tides were high and the moon was full, though, greasy black smoke billowed from its chimney. Mothers gathered their infants in their arms and fled, engulfed by the stink. The witch of Fredham was in her kitchen, whispered would travel from cottage to cottage. With each passing year, the vile odors from the kitchen erupted more frequently, for the neighborhood around Fredham had become a battleground of magic, where the witch's hell-born powers clashed with the more benign sorcery of a nearby wizard. The witch walked across the countryside late at night, gathering herbs by moonlight, causing trouble and listening for quarrels she could use in her spells. The wizard would retaliate by scorching the crone's tongue with a hot rod every time she charmed herself into the farmer's churn and drank the milk. In protecting the community, he cured sickness where she spread it, even using a spell to repair the appearance of one of the village children who had been deformed by her evil eye. In the turret window of the wizard's home, she could regularly see a single candle glowing against the nighttime sky. Her adversary sat there, she knew, turning the brittle pages of ivory-bound books with gold edges. The witch had run her hands over such tomes in hopes of drawing their power, but nothing had happened. She spit and turned away from the light, assuring herself that she didn't need magic from books. She fashioned her own magic with herbs and flowers, cat's blood and toad skin, just like her mother and her grandmother had taught her. Yet, in order to counter the encroachments of her high-born and learned competitor, she descended down the craggy cliffs above Kynet's Cove one moonlit night to summon an ally. She kneeled at the water's edge as the tide began to recede, and softly whispered a demon's name. Instantly, a hissing creature burst into being at her feet, its twisted, puckered face glowing red in the firelight. She crouched beside it and offered a bargain. The witch promised her soul in exchange for power over her enemy. But as her tarnished soul was not a very great prize, the hellish creature refused her terms. Instead, it offered only the secret of a brew that would enslave anyone it touched. Thinking this potion was sufficient to her ends, the witch accepted the demon's offer and hurried home. In her smoke-stained kitchen, she mixed the ingredients, the infernal beverage, in a cauldron. Then she concocted a second preparation, a toxic dilution of deadly nightshade, in a bucket. She trekked through the twisting paths the next night, bent beneath the heavy weight of her twin load, until she came to a crossroads where she knew the wizard had to pass. She dropped the bucket in the middle of the road, hoping a hot, fatigued horse would be enticed by its poisoned water. The witch crouched down in a ditch, cauldron close by her, and giggled at the ingenuity of her scheme. Before the wizard's master could feel the witch's net closing around him, the wild mare would drink deeply of the maddening concoction, and he would be flung by the crazed animal. As he lay shocked and helpless on the ground, it would be simple to douse him with the contents of the cauldron. Hoofbeats echoed down the deserted road, and and the witch skulked deeper into the shadows. The mare reared, started by the unusual item in the crossroads. But the wizard's foresight was too much for the old hag. He spoke in the horse's ear as he leaned forward in his saddle. The beast immediately turned and kicked the bucket, which flew across the road and landed at the witch's feet. As the brew washed over her, the crone shouted. A whirlwind swept out of the silent heavens as the wizard yelled at the night sky. The demon from Kynan's Cove rode at the top of the storm, enraging it even more. As the witch was overwhelmed by the winds, the bucket was also swept into the cyclone's eye and magically extended into the shape of a coffin. The crone was snatched up into the air by the flying sarcophagus as it descended earthward. As she faded from view, her cauldron bobbed after her. The magician then urged his horse homeward with a triumphant laugh. He knew the witch was still aloft on the wind that night, and all the nights after, when the storms pounded the coast, swooping down to stir up the waves under her. He merely had to shout a command from the roof of his turret to see the storm die away, as his defeated opponent deferred to his overwhelming force. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Remember to smash the like button. The witches' and wizards' abilities stemmed not just from Demon's Brew, but also from ancient understanding of plants that bloomed in hedgerows, meadows, and graveyards. Magic-wielding men and women were well versed in the properties of all growing things and how to manipulate them for their desire. The skill and cunning with which they manipulated nature was a bequest from a long line of sorcerers who traced their lineage back to Hecate's priests and priestesses. Hecate, goddess of the witchcraft in ancient Greece, was represented by the moon. When the goddess's full orb hung frigid and white in the night sky, her supplicants knew that the goddess's power streamed down in its radiance upon all earthly existence. Practitioners knew herbs chosen under Hecate's control would impart superhuman malevolence to any enchantment. When carrying out her lethal harvest under the moon, the Witch of Freedom followed an age-old concept of her kind. She and her competitors gathered plants for good or evil, according to a sophisticated calendar of days and hours. Remember to hit the bell so you're notified when we put out new mysterious videos.